Good morning, good afternoon, good evening for everyone who is joining us for the CXO series. Today we have icons in our ecosystem. So first tell me, where are you joining us from? I'm Chaitra Vedalapalli. I'm the president of Women in Cloud. Very excited to host you. I'm joining from Seattle and planning to go to San Francisco right after this call. Very exciting. There you go. We have people from Long Beach, Los Angeles, Seattle, Toronto. Everyone, welcome. Today is one of those sessions that you want to be here because you're going to learn about how to think about AI and ROI because those two do not go together very well. So now today we get to answer those questions. We have Michelle Ambrosius. She's going to come and talk about how you need to think about the ROI. We have Angela and Miles. They will be talking about the intersection of IT spending and business impact in the era of digital transformation. So what are we going to learn today? So going to next slide, please. Do you all know what are we going to learn today? It's a CXO series. Very much get answers. So the more active you are, the more questions you ask, the better it is for you. So how many of you are going to be active? Put it in the chat saying, I'm going to be active. Say yes in the chat. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Hannah. The more active you are, the more questions you ask, the better it is for you to acquire the skills. We will focus a lot on the ROI piece and then also talk about the opportunities to get skilled in AI, especially the areas where the use cases are getting formed, where the ROI is getting created. That's where you have to be skilled so that you can get the opportunity. And we are really lucky to have Insight. They have been our amazing partner for many years and also helping us with the Empower Her Access Awards. They are the presenting sponsor. They've really helped women to really take the leadership role. And I want all of you to really enjoy the experience. How many of you are new to Women in Cloud? If you are new to Women in Cloud, put new in the chat. And okay, we have few new people. So first is welcome to Women in Cloud. Very excited to have you. We are a community of 100,000 members in 67 countries with the intent and a mission to create $1 billion of economic access for entrepreneurs and professionals by 2030. The way we do it is through workforce and leadership development, really ensuring that you have skilled in the technology by providing you certification and credentialing scholarship, which usually values at like $6,500 per year. So go ahead and apply for those opportunities. And then we have an Insider Circle program to help you accelerate your leadership persona and the thought leadership content in the market. The second area we focus on is around economic development to help you really unlock your go-to-market with hyperscalers, especially in the mid and enterprise customer ecosystem. So that's where we want to make sure you're ready with go-to-market. And the last one is work with policymakers to really drive advocacy and representation for women. And each one of you need to look at and see, how do you represent yourself? What are the rights that we need to have in place in the AI economy? And that is what we are working on. Before we get started, I have a question for you, and we want to open up your mind, and then I will invite today's keynote speaker. The question is, when it comes to AI and cybersecurity careers, what do you want to learn about the skills and trade by top executives within the Fortune 1000 brands? What do you want to learn today? Because Michelle, Miles, and Angela, all of them are going to come and talk about it. But before that, I want to know, what do you want to learn today? You're going to be spending an hour. I want to make it worth it for each one of you. Take a moment. Personally, for me, I really want to understand the use cases of AI in the marketing space and how can you create ROI for our customers. And it's really important is what kind of skills I need to acquire from a leadership standpoint. How do you really help the customers to really open up their mind, saying that how can they drive predictions in marketing, how they can drive automation with campaign acceleration and implementation, and also what kind of chatbots we could create or AI bots we could create, which allows you to really accelerate the go-to-market. Okay, there's some few stuff. We have AI. We have aligned my product with the AI trends. Beautiful. Most sought out certification and training. I think, Nicole, that we will answer that. How do I prove AI brings in ROI? Beautiful, Betsy. And how will companies change with these new tools and understand potential threats of AI and how cybersecurity can assist? And there's a lot of fear and uncertainty when people hear about the topic AI. How do we change this perspective in business? First, you're all going to get the answers. I'm really excited for having all these questions answered for you today. How are you going to engage? Going to next slide. On your right side, there is a section called as Q&A. As you are going to get those amazing questions, you're going to put it in the chat because we will come and moderate it for you. By the time you leave today's session, you should have majority of your dilemmas and your fears and your uncertainty resolved so that you can move forward either to get skilled, either to build a tech, or either contributing to your company in the way they are asking you to do so that they can increase the top line numbers for their organization. Sounds good? So with that, I would love to introduce today's keynote speaker. That is Michelle Ambrose. Very excited to meet with her and really have the conversation. She's a senior vice president, SADA at Insight, and she has 20 years of experience in tech, public sector strategy, and really knows how to do strategic partnership. So some of the questions you really need to ask is, how does she do strategic partnerships in this area, especially in AI, which is extremely hard to do? So with that, I would love to welcome Michelle. Very excited to have you today. As you start the session, what's your favorite chocolate?
Hi, Jaja. Oh, good question. I love starting a Friday morning with that. My favorite chocolate is, I stumbled across it one time in a supermarket. It's like a 70% dark cocoa, but has bacon and caramel in it. So I feel like it's a very gourmet kind of chocolate, but I think I've never seen anything more creative. So that's my favorite chocolate.
Well, Michelle, I will ask all our community members to send you some chocolate because you're going to do some amazing stuff and unlocking some really cool stuff. And what are you excited for today to talk about?
Yeah, we're going to dive into it, but I'm really excited to share with you just a slither of some of the things we're seeing in the AI space. I think it's one of the most transformative eras we're all going to live through, and happy to talk through some high-level grounding around what we're seeing in the market, and then have a conversation with Miles and Angela about how we're really seeing customers and companies start to use AI, and answer some of those questions I saw come up in chat. I think we'll definitely hit on a few of those, and those that we don't, we can come back to for sure.
Beautiful. With that, I'm going to hand over the baton and inspire the rest of the community. I think everybody's excited to have you here today.
Very excited to be here. And thank you I put myself in as new in the community. This is my first time joining. So really appreciate the opportunity to come and spend some time with you all. There's this little thing called Gen AI that we're going to talk about. And it's been the sort of topic du jour for about 570 days now. So it's starting to get beyond the hot topic and something you can't look anywhere within business without hearing folks talk about it. It really exploded in November 2022 when ChatGPT came out in the market and brought a number of very impressive and transformative capabilities out and put them in the hands of pretty much anyone who wanted to sign up. AI itself has been around for quite some time. AI and machine learning are technologies that a lot of the largest companies in the tech space have been using. Google uses them in a bunch of their tools and have done for many years. It's the generative capabilities that are new in the last 12 to 18 months. The rate of new models, capabilities across different platforms and products that we're seeing has truly been exponential. Google alone made over 1,000 updates just in Gen AI in the last year. They had 260 announcements at Google Next in April of this year. And you will hear me reference Google a little bit more. SADA, as part of Insight, we focus on the Google business, and I've spent the last 10 years in the Google Cloud ecosystem. So I'm a little biased, but a lot of the trends apply across all the hyperscalers and the different companies working in this space. I just even want to underpin even more how truly transformational I think this space is for us. Sundar Pichai, again, CEO of Google, he's said a few times it's more profound than fire and electricity. And he's been saying that for 5 years. So it's not a new trend to just get onto the marketing hype around it. I think really what we're seeing is different. And it's really not just how do we do things smarter and faster, it's how do we do things completely differently from how we've done them before. That being said, it's early in the cycle of us understanding what's possible. There's been a lot of hype for sure, but I also think what I'm going to talk through and then what Miles and Angela I will discuss is also from over a year now. We have spent a lot of time with hundreds of customers. You can see it in the data from the big consulting firms as well, and the big work. And I actually asked Miles this question a year ago. I was like, what is this for us? And it's a lot of time helping people understand what these tools are and what is possible. And really, so that's where we've been spending a lot of time on all of that. I'll touch quickly just on our capabilities so you know who we are, a little bit about SADA. We're proudly part of the Insight family. We joined in December, and we're excited to be part of their journey as a multi-cloud solutions integrator. We've been working to help customers transform their business using the power of Google Cloud for over a decade, getting on 2 decades. And we've really been at the forefront of this Gen AI wave of capabilities. Literally, we have over 200 folks in the SADA business who are on a daily community chat. I watch it, but it's far more technical than my day-to-day expertise holds. But they're literally testing, trialing as new models come out, new capabilities, and then also working with customers to build what is possible for their organizations. So I'll move on then to talk a little bit about the size of the opportunity. I think on the next slide here, the application of Gen AI has the potential to contribute up to $7 trillion of GDP to rise to that much over the next 10 years. That is a significant amount of economic impact. Over 3/4 of this potential is estimated to be productivity gains in the 4 areas you see here: customer operations, Chaicha, I have something for you, marketing and sales, software engineering, and product development. And early returns from some of the earlier adopters are showing things like when they're streamlining business processes, they're getting a 5 to 15% increase in productivity or gain. And when we look at employee productivity, and that includes knowledge workers, frontline workers, developers, 20 to 45% productivity gains. And when we think about customer service efficiency at a high level, 30 to 45% gains. Now, this work comes from some analysis McKinsey did over a bunch of 850 occupations, 2,000 plus detailed work activities. But these numbers are the sorts of numbers that are, I think historically, many of us would say 1, 3, 5, 7, even 10% productivity gain was like a really phenomenal number and had very widespread business impacts. You'll see as I get more into some of our value maps, all of the impact here is really quite material. It's really going to change a lot for how all of this work. And Jojo, that's exactly it. Somebody mentioned fear as well. I think like other waves we've seen before, yes, it's going to transform things. There's always the concern, are the computers going to take over and us poor biologically made up entities going to be out of jobs? I'm like, no, I think it's going to take any other technical wave or technology revolution we've seen before is going to change what we do for sure. It's going to change what skills are important. With the advent of the internet and smartphones and plenty of other technologies like them through humankind, there's always just been a shift in how we work and what we focus on. And actually, to your point, a lot of the repetitive work changes and hopefully we get better and we get to spend our time on more high value, more complex, truly human activities. So thinking about ROI, what we're seeing as we move to the next slide is early adopters of ROI are seeing, of AI, Gen AI, I should say, are seeing significant ROI in the first 24 months. We're seeing, this was from an Anderson Horowitz report that they were picking up this. There were some examples around things like Mercado Libre, who found that by augmenting their 9,000 human developers with GitHub Copilot, they had a 50% reduction in time coding. There's been seen things like 90% time saved on video editing. I think media and entertainment is an industry that is actually based in LA here. I have a couple of friends who've gotten out of the movie business and they are into the AI business with regards to how do they think about applying that to the entertainment industry. So we've seen significant time saving on video editing, which is a really time-consuming effort from a human perspective. So there's some really big shifts we're going to see in a variety of industries. One other thing when we think about the ROI, if we move on to think about the spending patterns we're seeing in the Gen AI space, I think that's super interesting on the next slide there around who's really spending on Gen AI. So we saw a lot in 2023 that most of when late 2022, GPT came out, a lot of other models came out early 2020. It was a lot of innovation budgets. It was a lot of trialing, early experimentation. What's shifting in this model here is from Anderson and Horowitz in 2024. The budget is moving from one-off efforts into software line items that are recurring on the company's P&L. It's also coming out of business lines are funding it. So this is really important that it's no longer being funded by experiments from the innovation or R&D team, but across the business, there's money coming in to really invest in AI. And we're also seeing business leaders offset them against headcount savings, particularly in customer services. We saw one company was citing they're saving $6 for every call that's run by their LLM, so their large language model powered customer service. That's a 90% cost saving for them. So when you think about the implications for what that frees up from a resource perspective for where else they can invest in product, in engineering, in new lines of business, that's absolutely huge. So then that leads us on to talk a little bit about how does that actually change organizations? So you were all sharing a few of you about what skills and what to think about. I think one of the interesting things that the generative AI era is going to bring for us is AI and ML were often solving line of business problems sort of on the left here because of the ability for the tools to now be able to not just be like linear, but like get into many different types of data, have more complex functioning. We're going to see more and more that the departments in different organizations end up merging and being able to work more together as the Gen AI kind of ties some of the more fundamental processes that used to be very like linear in line of business. So I think we're going to see more and more teaming up of things like finance and legal and sales support and marketing start to become much more holistic as the tools allow for that integration. And that means one thing for me, you asked about skills. I'm like, if you work in a particular line of business, having a better understanding of the lines of business that you most work with and what is the joint business outcome that you're all focused on getting. That's if you're in a business now and you're in marketing and you don't fully understand the flow through from the functions around you, that's an area that I would invest in your own business of understanding better and then looking for opportunities for where you could be using AI to streamline those junctions. So all of that is good, but then what does that actually mean when we get into actual use cases for customer value? So here's a framework we've been using. This is a set of 32 use cases we've refined. I think the first list our team drafted after about probably the first 3 or 4 months of like workshops and conversations and ideation with customers. We had a list of 90 use cases that Miles and I were reviewing with the team. And we started to really narrow this down to like specific things we're seeing in certain industries across certain lines of business. And this is a great place to start to get to more specifically, what are you trying to solve and what are the outcomes you're looking for? A couple of examples, some of these highlights in pink that we've actually done with customers. One of the media entertainment ones, we work with an MBA team. We used AI recommendations for media to, on their mobile app, promote articles, events, videos, increase user engagement to drive ticket sales. So that was a direct business outcome. They saw an increase in their ticket sales and again, they can track that really nicely and really cleanly. That used to be a much more manual process of setting up the things you would prompt and coding it all in. The model now also learns and makes additional recommendations. We've also seen one in here, I'll talk about the manufacturing use case. So this was for a tech manufacturer. And essentially it was building recommendations into their CRM and e-commerce platform. So for both their salespeople and customers shopping online, really, and essentially looking at customer buying patterns, building better connections between which products might be related, or if you're looking for this, if you're looking for product A, product B is a pretty good proxy, or you might actually be looking for product B based on what you search for. And within 8 weeks, that drove an additional $15 million of pipeline once it was deployed. So about a $15 million annualized impact was the estimate for that one customer. And then one other one I'll talk about, there are tons of use cases When we think about digital native businesses, they're already natively online, quite often in the cloud. They're actually very well. So that's one of the other things I'll touch on in a minute, like having all your infrastructure and your data in the right place is critical to get the most benefit. We saw developer productivity, I mentioned earlier, with a couple of customers be massively improved. And there was one, we have worked with a marketing solutions company, and really they combine data, digital, and email to drive and deliver marketing campaigns. They were able to generate audience profile reports for particularly marketing campaigns, identify crossover target markets from web statistics, and really enhance and increase the impact of their campaigns through this ability to what used to be a bunch of static data pools and analysts poring over to try and find the insight. This is the kind of work that when given the right model and the right prompts, the generative AI does a really good job of the first 60-70% of gathering those insights and recommendations. And then if we move along to the next slide, this is some work we've done. Just to reiterate, I touched on it earlier, the sorts of percentages of value and gain and impact we're seeing across these different use cases. And this is what kind of gets to, like, this isn't just a little blip on a hype cycle. These are all a combination of work done by Gartner, Boston Consulting Group, McKinsey, and others. I mentioned earlier one company that had seen some CSAT, some customer satisfaction results. There was another fintech company. They saw a 95% reduction in their cost per support interaction. What I thought was really interesting was the AI's median response rate was 45 times higher, just because it was a chat interface and able to get through customers quicker, and it had better customer satisfaction. So I think we've all been on the call center wait line for 35 minutes to get what actually is pretty rudimentary information. So I think that's a space where the impact for this is absolutely massive. So how do you get to those results? You need a proven path. So if we move along to get to those kind of results, you need to actually, there's three main steps on the next slide there that we generally follow. And I'll talk you through a little bit more of our journey that we follow. Simply identify those use cases. So these value maps, their ideas, they're always a great starting point. The nuance of any individual company or product is going to be quite specific. So you want to workshop that, make sure you're thinking through the ROI upfront so that you know what you want to measure against. You then go work through what's the solution definition, and then really build out a roadmap for how you get there. One thing we like to do at Cider, and I know for Wider Insight, is we want to create minimum viable products, not proof of concept. A conceptual idea is great. We work with our customers to, as quickly as possible, get to something, even if it's a pilot on a small amount of data or a small part of the business, to show the possibility so that you can then decide how much to invest. On the next slide, there's a little bit more detail of how we walk through that, and really how that helps you walk through, like, how do you go from idea generation, use case identification. A key point here that I touched on when I talked about how this capability is going to change our organization structure, the importance of multiple stakeholders. It's not an IT project anymore to digitally transform. It is a business-wide imperative. And then we work through with you on potential opportunities, identifying the ROI, building out that minimal viable product. And then down along the bottom on the pink, that kind of highlights, depending on what we find and learn there, usually as customers, there may be additional work around data infrastructure, underlying tech stack and infrastructure, as well as security and other things you need to consider as you get to that end result. This stuff is going fast. That's the other thing I'll say. We've seen customers go from workshop to production in months, not years. And that, I think, when you think back to, I'm sure many of you have been around different IT-related projects that are really like years in the making. So it's a huge change for how quickly we're seeing transformation be delivered, which I personally find is super exciting. So important ingredients for success: developing a clear strategy around Gen AI and what you're trying to get out. So that's why I've been touching on these use cases and what is it you hope to get for it. I mentioned modernizing and cleaning up your data. That's the most important. You probably may need some work on the infrastructure, but Miles is probably better to comment on how much you can actually get done with some of just cleaning up the data. We were discussing it of actually the tools we have now mean we can bridge between the infrastructure or the tools and systems we have better. So you might not even worry too much about fixing the old stuff as long as you've got good connection. Investing in security and making sure you keep your data and IP safe, and then retraining your workforce. So that's a final part of helping people think through how are they going to use these tools? What does it mean for them? And what do they need to do differently, which is a huge area. So that brings me to wrapping up the keynote sort of part of the session, which is what you can do today and then what you can do in the long term. So focusing on one workflow in your line of business, or depending on what your purview is, proving out the value. So that's where we really love those MVPs, minimal viable product, better than a proof of concept, because it takes the idea, starts to put it into action, and really shows what can be done. Core productivity is one of the easiest options. Gemini for Workspace, Copilot for Microsoft. This is an area which is, I think we're seeing a ton of demand here. We're seeing a lot of the most usage. I think it's the most straightforward, easy to apply view for folks to get into. Even the basics. We've started doing this even in my team. I was like, yeah, there's no more note taking. The tools in our computers can now do that for us. They can also summarize, suggest the actions. I really think you can get almost anything you work on at work about 60% drafted with some pretty minimal input, which I love, because I think back to is there fear all our jobs are going to disappear? No, our jobs change. Instead of taking the notes, where we spend more time being able to think through what are the insights, what's the highest value activity that we can do, how do we transform that and actually go faster to get to the outcome, versus more time spent on, okay, are the notes good? Are the actions right? So it's been really impressive. We've been doing it at SADA. I've seen it done in part of wider Insight of We've joined as well. So that would be if you haven't started anywhere, I would start there, even just to start to understand it for yourself and your personal workflow. And then the long term, these are really revolutionary tools that we're dealing with. The increased productivity is a bit of a no-brainer, but I would really be thinking through, when you think about it more organizationally, where can you have the most financial impact? Where do you have data? What's the data and the source to be able to train the models? As I've said data a few times in the last couple of minutes, and there's a good reason for that. There's the value that this capability is bringing out is the ability to very quickly pull together literally billions of points of data much more quickly than we could ever do. There's a guy called Benedict Evans who writes a newsletter that I like and I follow, and he describes Gen AI as, you now have literally like infinite interns, and one intern who can infinitely analyze and pull up pattern, have great pattern recognition. That's been sticking with me of, the stuff that we used to ask folks early career to spend a lot of time combing through things and finding patterns, we can now do at a much higher velocity and speed, and that has major implications. And then I do think the impacts for the workforce. So I don't think we should be fearful. I think one thing I would say that's critical here is having a growth mindset, understanding what's going on, and then really thinking through what does that mean for you and for your organization. So with that, I think that's all I wanted to share to get the conversation started, give you some food for thought. I'm now going to introduce Angela and Miles to come on as well. So I'll start with Angela. Angela has extensive experience implementing a range of cross-functional programs. She delivers new products and markets to service. She's senior project manager inside Insight. She does a fabulous job. I've gotten to know her personally because she's been working on a lot of the things for us as we've started to integrate into Insight. And comes with a huge background of, I think Angela's the person I want to call when I'm starting to put some of these projects into play, and she'll be moderating the rest of our conversation here. Welcome, Angela.
Great. Thank you so much for that introduction. Really appreciate you joining today and walking us through all things Gen AI. It's a great overview. And on behalf of Insight, we are excited that SADA is a part of our team and our brand. It truly has been great to work on the integration team with you both. I'll appreciate that. And now I'll introduce Miles and then we'll get started. Miles has extensive experience helping in startups, agencies, ISVs, enterprise leverage cloud computing and accelerating their businesses. He has supported organizations like Twitter, Newstar, Digital Turbine, and NASA in adopting Google Cloud, as well as he contributed to the Obama for America's campaign in 2012. Previously, Miles designed a social media engagement system for Fortune 1000 companies at Visible Technologies. His expertise spans solution architect, cloud infrastructure, machine learning, AI, UI, UX, digital data visualization, and explaining technical concepts to people like me, the business side, who need all of that translation. So appreciate that and welcome, Miles.
Oh, thank you, Angela. I appreciate it. It's you missed the last part. I am also an electric tuba god, but I'm
Oh, see, they
very,
didn't give
very,
me that note. Now, I mean,
yeah, no,
I'm asked for a
that's the best
demo.
one. But yeah, lots of time helping companies implement all of this AI magic that's creating so much excitement. So I'm looking forward to talking shop.
Fantastic. With that, we're going to jump in. So starting, we're going to build on some of the insights that Michelle covered from the presentation. What practical metrics and framework can companies use to demonstrate the ROI in Gen AI projects?
Sure, you got to work either the R or the I, right? It's pretty straightforward. And most of the projects that we're seeing are working on the R side. So if you're doing marketing, you're trying to figure out, how do I produce content that attracts more viewers, that gets more clicks, that is more interesting. Sometimes that's about filling more niches or being able to get closer to certain audience categories. The other kinds of things that we're seeing a lot of folks work on is on the I side. How do I make it so it costs less to produce that kind of content, or how do I make it so that it's simpler for us to sift through a brief? Or so there's a lot of these technologies that are really exceptional at summarizing and pontificating, right? So if you've got a little teeny prompt and you want to tell a story for half an hour, it does a great job at that. And you've got a little bit of a long brief and it's a squinty thing and you want to break that down to something a little smaller. You don't have to have 3 interns read it for 4 hours and try to figure out what's going on. You can get the machine to do that. For a lot of our customers, the use cases are very diverse, and so difficult to summarize in a setting like this. But I think it's important to recognize almost all the places where you're doing something more than 4 or 5 times a day, there's probably an opportunity to get some help on that.
Great. All right, love that. Many companies are starting with small scale, right? So identifying those small areas that they can, like the 3 to 4 repeatable processes, as they're doing these Gen AI experiments. What are the key considerations for taking a successful Gen AI pilot project and turning it into a scalable solution that really brings that long-term business value?
Sure. We built a framework for all applications called the well-architected framework about 15 years ago. It lays out availability, the thing has to actually work. Durability, if it isn't working, did you just lose everything? Cost efficiency, does it cost $1 trillion to run the thing? Performance, is anybody still here when it gets done running? And security. Those 5 items are the kind of 5-legged stool, if you want, of almost every application. And I think most technicians have started to get to a place where they have a feel for the relative level of effort to deliver a relative level of capability on any one of those 5. Cloud computing has made, say, for example, things like availability radically less expensive than they were in previous periods. Generative AI applications are challenging a bunch of those norms because they behave differently than deterministic software. So one good example is, think on September 10th, 2001, the short phrase 9/11 kind of doesn't really mean anything. And then 3 days later, it totally does. And that deviation in our language, our terminology, the interconnected map of relationships between words and concepts that we all use to communicate ideas, which are the basis on which generative AI does all of the magic that it does, is changing all the time in every different mark and area of human communication. And software that creates great chat responses or produces clear marketing content or helps you understand your boss's latest 400-page missive, it'll work worse tomorrow, right? As language deviates, any tool that you build and run on your own needs to be maintained. And that's new. That's a kind of a new thing in comparison to more deterministic software. So we're working with a lot of companies to help think through, how do you build one kind of measurement of those 4 or 5 different critical areas for your generative AI systems, so that you can tell that you're holding to the standards that your business expects. If you can keep those measures in place, if you can be as available as you want to be and not lose data all the time and make sure that you're securely operating, then the business benefit that you've documented is something that you preserve typically. So that's the effort that goes into making it so that these things provide a durable benefit.
Yeah. The one thing I'll add to some of Miles' commentary as well is when you think about taking a pilot and making it scalable, and maybe it's embedded a little bit in your well-architected framework, Miles, but the data and the governance around data. So all of a sudden you're using a lot more information that you might have within your company or out other data sources externally, and having a lens on how that's governed, how it's good quality. Like it's always been the perennial conversation with anything data related, like garbage in, garbage out. And that's even more so when you're working with models that are then learning on top of said data. So I think that's another thing of like when you're in proof of concept, minimal viable product, like you can have you can ring fence what you're working with and test it out. When you start to scale things at a wider realm, the importance of having good data governance and ownership and architecture and understanding of what you're pulling from is really important.
I'll add to that. You're exactly right. That data is totally critical. The other thing that I think we use generative AI as a singular label, and I think most people are exposed. And I think there's kind of one set of behaviors that make most sense around the SaaS products. So Chat GPT or Gemini, or you're going to go into a web user interface, type some stuff, and it will type you a thing back. Those are products that are managed by big companies, and they're responsible for the maintenance of quality of the outcomes based on the chat that you provide. Those kinds of systems, they change all the time, right? They get very different responses. So you got to just start to learn how they work. And you have absolutely no control over those changes, right? That's the company's product that you consume. And so you have to go on the ride. They also can change the price on that stuff. They can change terms of service. So you have to be a diligent consumer of a product if that's the case. Generative AI is also deployable as open source models. I have one sitting here running on my laptop now. That's a thing that there's much more control over, but with control and power comes, like Spider-Man said, responsibility, or I think that's Spider-Man's dad. So it's really important to recognize all that stuff that the company that gives you, say, Chat GPT or Gemini is doing to keep that thing working right. Oh, that's now your job. Oh no. And you have a whole bunch more sort of stuff to take track of. It is an even further, more complicated problem when you are talking about building customer-facing applications that include these kinds of components that you're controlling. If it's a system that's just being used by you and your team, that's one kind of blast radius for you're getting weird answers, or it doesn't work today, or there's some other kind of problem. It's a much bigger blast radius if you're serving millions of downstream users, things like that. And many advertising systems can. It's important to treat those with the responsibility that they deserve.
We've talked a lot about the data quality that supports Gen AI. What about the talent that's required when companies are talking about Gen AI adoption? Can you dive a little into that?
I'm sorry, that broke up for a second. You say that again?
The talent gaps, when we talk about what talent is required for our companies when we're trying to do Gen AI adoption.
Again, that depends a lot on which of these layers of technology you're trying to work in. And I think pretty easy to tell the distinction. There's very useful, very easy, short form primers. There was a question in the chat about what are the great certifications, right? The Google's Cloud Digital Leader. There's a AI practitioner cert that's a part of Google systems. There are near equivalents of that kind of thing in the GPT ecosystem. For users of these tools, trying to use them to augment the way that they organize information in prep for work or using them day to day, those are great ways to get an early start on what's the context they need to use these kinds of tools confidently. For developers that are building applications on the back of these tools, there's, I think, one of the most powerful resources is available completely free. Google built an AI crash course. Its own internal training materials that were used to train Google developers on how to build AI apps are available to everybody at this point. Those kinds of materials really give the kind of primer that you need, set up the kind of cycle testing and output evaluation and prompt management and all the rest of that kind of stuff. The prompt that you put in, the way that you coach the machine to give you the information that you want, those are kind of, they're a little, I always think that I'm Hermione going, right? You have to have the magic words just right, and then groovy things come out the far side of these deals. Those incantations should be curated. Don't lose them. If you get a good one that works great, hang on to it, right? Keep a little folder of that for a document that you maintain. Those can be a great way to accelerate your personal workflow around these tools.
Yeah. The other thing I'll add to Miles is more specific. I think the whole prompt engineer is a job. That's the magic one. You get really good at understanding it. I think there's a wave of some of that. I also think there's part of more broadly, as we think about being in a space where there's pretty revolutionary technology coming into the scene, a learning and growth mindset. So there's two approaches to this. I'm super scared about it. I put my head down. And if you're here on the last day of the quarter hanging out with us, I'm going to suggest you probably don't fall into that bucket. But I do think, and I would actually say, I think, because like I'm more on the business side than technical. Miles and I have been hanging out for a long time and he's my go-to. What does that really mean? And I think this is an area more than any other that, if to your point, the basic certifications, but don't get overwhelmed by how much information there is. Start small, but have that real learning and growth mindset. We're actually at a part in this like curve of innovation where nobody knows all of it. No, maybe Miles knows 80-90%. There's a handful of people who like know a lot, but like really genuinely, and this is what I mentioned, the community of our technical folks, like the rate at which they're learning and needing to learn is pretty phenomenal. So I'm always like, that's an opportunity to start, even if you're starting more as the user in that construct. Like, how do I use this to do my day-to-day job better? So I'd say don't be overwhelmed, break it down to specific things you want to trial and tinker with. And I would say get out there and just try. And then my other more meta observation, what I've been thinking a lot about, have early elementary age kids. I think if anything, this thing doubles down on the skills that are important in life are the human skills, your EQ, your ability to like engage with others. Like, how do you think about how you operate in the world when actually, so that'd be my much more meta thing of what are you working on? The technology, like understand technology and what's possible. And I think those are a couple of things I'd add more broadly, depending on where you're coming at it from.
Yeah, look, this thing is a terrible toddler, but with strange savant-like capacities for access to broad sets of information and very strong reading comprehension. I think everybody's skill set with bossing around their kids is actually like super applicable stuff, right? And I think one of the things that a lot of my folks that I've worked with struggle with is it's okay. You can just ask it to do your homework. It's there to do the stuff you want it to do. It's trying real hard to do. That's why the machine was built. A big thing is to get over the shyness of just trying it to take a crack at anything. The worst thing that could possibly happen is that it spits out a response that just doesn't make any sense. And as long as you feel like you have, and there is the critical wrinkle, if you feel like you have the ability to correctly evaluate the output of the question that you're asking, then it's just totally a great idea for you to ask it to a machine of this type. If you don't, you have no idea what it is you're about to get back, and you're just hoping for something interesting, tread carefully. There may be a corroboratory Google search or two, like those kinds of things. The way these tools are built, they're really bad at saying, I don't know. So if you feel like it's going to get to that spot, it's going to do just probably what your toddler does and goes, I've got a great idea. It's like this, and totally make something up. Just be prepared for that.
Love it. Yes, that's definitely true. And sometimes you type things in and you get a very random response. You're like, okay, let me try that a different way. So yeah.
Right.
Perfect. So we've talked about the skills and the mindsets for the new collaborative world. We're going to move on a little bit to how do we talk about the emerging trends and the capabilities that we come to see in the future, and how can we leverage those?
Future. The future is coming at us real fast. And so I think if there's anything, it's try to take on your planning over shorter timescale chunks, right? I think there were a lot of people of older generations who would expect to start a specific class of career, and they'll be a lawyer, and when they die they're going to be a lawyer, and the tasks that they will do as a lawyer will be the same basically the whole time, and maybe they go from like pen and paper to typewriter. Yay, there's like a direct accelerant of a specific thing that they're doing. The nature of many professions we think will change fairly dramatically over the course of the next 5 years, decade, 15 years, things like that. And the folks that will be successful in that context are the folks that are adept at learning new tasks, new approaches, right? I don't have anybody, like really anybody, that is just, they're digging in and they're getting out the abacus to make sure that they figure out corporate finances. It doesn't matter how much you love your abacus, no one's doing it. And that set of skills is no longer relevant in the job market, and you're going to have to retrain to a new thing. I think most businesses, most employers have to recognize that if you're going to stay in business, you have to change constantly, and you have to anticipate retraining and reorientation of worker teams and internal reorganizations to support that on a more frequent basis. For a lot of employees, that is extremely unsettling and frustrating for a lot of people. I want to make an investment in a skill set and then have that investment pay off for long term. So that also means you should be pushing your employers to provide a bunch of that training and acceleration of your learning, looking to free and online sources for those materials, because some big expensive credential is going to be totally useless in 20 years, right? I had a buddy that got this like unbelievably high bar Hadoop certification, which is a data warehousing platform that was so incredibly important. It saved my startup. We were totally toast. Now we like giggle about it as we pry that technology out of legacy companies. The difference between those two dates is only about 13 years. Yeah. So we really have to recognize the change rate is increasing, and any of the supports that you can use, including the generative tools, they're really good at helping you learn new subjects. Make it your teacher, make it summarize stuff for you, give you the critical bullet points, quiz you on stuff. It can do all that. Those are great ways to get ready for what the increasing change rate in professions will drive.
Michelle, anything to add on how companies can really try and stay ahead of that curve, or for the best that we can future-proof, right, our AI strategies?
I'm like, work with us. I'm joking, but also like to our point of this is moving so fast. Like even as like, you know, Miles and I have both been miles longer than me, been in the cloud world, like on the front edge of this, with our most like early adopter customers early in 2023 about what do we do with this, and what we would have said in 2023 around what's possible, what's shifting. So I do think the future proofing is to realize that it is not, to some of Miles's points, and this is also, we have shifted from the static nature of here's a thing and it'll last for 5 to 10 years, and it is continuing to shift. So I think like, how do you future proof? You either need to work with or be employing people who are working on understanding what you can do and deploying it quickly. I think you need to be adapt. Miles touched on it, and I look more interested in like organizational structures and speed of movement. My experience, I was at Google for 10 years. I've been at SADA for 3. They're both very agile organizations. We don't wait to the end of the year if we start to see a trend where we're like, that's really starting to impact this. Miles, I think it was an Eric Schmidt quote, which was like, somebody was complaining many years ago about the number of reorgs at Google. And he was like, no, we have to do them because it changed. And that's actually part of, I think, it used to be big tech companies. That's how they operate. Startups operate like that. But everybody now is now going to be in a world that has a higher rate of change. And that goes back to my comment about so I think companies need to future-proof with the reality of their past construct of, I have this very hierarchical structure and I have business units that are all going to be like this, and this is exactly how they're going to go, and here's my 5-year plan. I mean, I think you need to think about 5 years. I agree with Miles' other comment. Somebody asked me, like, what do you think this will be in 2 years? I'm like, I don't really know. I'm focused on 6 to 12, because that's all that I think is realistic for the amount of investment I'm going to put into shifts I would make versus the possibility that things will change. So I think all of that lends back to my earlier comment about high EQ, adaptability, learning mindset. Those are all things that as individuals we need to embrace, but as organizations we need to embrace, which I think is actually a layered challenge. But I think there's plenty of folks who have been talking about that from an organizational design, leadership perspective for quite some time. I think there's been lots of talk. I think larger organizations now are facing reality that if they don't operate like that, they will be left behind, and they will have smaller, more agile, needing less humans can disrupt their business. I think that's the other thing. That chart I showed on one of my slides, like I was like, that's the other shift from medium to large size companies, is that you used to have more of a kind of competitive moat. There are now startups that are coming after possibility, and they need 1/10 of the humans, and they can go pretty fast. So I personally think it's really exciting. It's a space of change but I think the future proofing comes in being eyes wide open and embracing like the possibility versus bunkering down. It might work for the next year or two, but at some point I think we're going to see enough change that organizations either adapt or they're going to, what's the right phrase?
The-
They're going to adapt or they're going to be forced to adapt. So it's, do you decide to drive that, or do you decide to react to it when it lands on your door? And I think generally if you're in the reacting seat, you're not going to have a lot of control over what happens organizationally or individually.
The way to measure that is the average age of companies in the S&P 500 gets shorter and shorter every year.
Yep.
And the ones that are on there have done backflips and triple flips. And is IBM really like an international business machines company anymore? Nope. They're here though, because they changed like crazy, right? So that's
so many ways on so many fronts.
You got to boogie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Google's still a search company.
And many more.
Perfect. Just one last quick question. You touched about how companies are future-proofing and some of the baseline around that, but how do we talk about the responsibilities for deployment and development around Gen AI, and where do we really have ethical considerations, especially that connection between humans and AI?
Sure. I think these are tools that we are using to communicate with each other. And just like our communication interpersonally can be unethical, the tools we are making can be incredibly unethical if used in inappropriate ways. In the same distinctions between what a product level consumption, let's call it, of an AI tool, a lot of that responsibility, but not all, falls to the provider, right? If there are biases inherent in the answers, they're the ones that are tuning the input data sets, or if there are content filtration that obscures groups of people or creates answers that are illogical because of the kind of filtration that gets used, that's the company's responsibility to sort out. If you are doing these kinds of deployments on your own in a production kind of development environment, you have exactly the same responsibility around kind of response management and content curation. And a lot of that can often be successfully driven by helpfully managing the inputs that you drive, right? There are a lot of people that are collecting things from the open internet. And I'm telling you, there are some back corners of the internet with some fairly unethical stuff on them. Garbage and real garbage in does in fact construct the garbage out. I think our responsibility is to recognize that at the end of the day, these are tools and we're the ones holding the tools. So I don't think anybody has ever charged a 9mm piece of metal as the murderer. It's always the person holding it. You've got to make sure that you're responsible for the outputs of these kinds of systems. And I think that responsibility expands as the distance between the action and the consumption of the output increases, right? If you're building systems that have outputs that then have outputs that get resummarized and then get promoted and then get pushed out, and there's millions of users at the far end, your commensurate responsibility to check your work and have safeguards in place, whether those are test conditions that you're evaluating for. There are some good standards bodies that are working on kinds of public evaluation tools that you can use to confirm that you're not producing radically gender biased or radically race biased responses, things like that. But we also, you have to recognize, we don't have perfect rules for this in just open human discourse. We're going to screw up every once in a while. So I don't want us to have unrealistic expectations about any of the technologies that we would build. But in particular, when you are cutting loose arbitrary people to interact with a system, you also have a much higher responsibility than it's like, instead of this team in our organization doing this task is going to use these tools for this outcome. That's much easier, as opposed to we put a chat bot on the website and we think that makes people like the website better. Now you have all the sort of strange possible outcomes associated with that. I recognize how big the opportunity is in accelerating customer service, but almost all the work that we're doing helping customer service folks use generative AI to lighten the load is about narrowing the scope of questions that we answer, not getting it to be ever more effusive about the sort of glories of Madagascar's biodiversity and every other conceivable random question you can ask about. All that breadth is really an incredible superpower, but it opens a pretty big can of worms too.
Thank you. Michelle, anything to add towards the end? If not,
I know we're running a little at time, so I don't know if folks do. I think Miles covered most of the key things from an ethical perspective. I'll just probably reiterate the point. I think there's plenty of work being done, like any new technology, into how to folks regulate and think it through. I think and one point I was going to say that there are some interesting companies focusing on how do they test their models for bias. There's one partner in Europe we were talking to a little bit. So I think there's plenty of folks in the ecosystem already thinking about the challenge. And so I think then it is, as companies are thinking about using Gen AI, like building that into some of what you need to do, depending on the topic. Like to Miles's point, like if you're mainly using it for customer service to pull things out of an existing database and the topic area you work in is fairly straightforward, then you're probably okay to be a little not quite as concerned. I think when you apply to healthcare and government services and a whole bunch of other places, I do think there's understandably a lot more rigor and caution required as we think about it. But I do think it comes back to, like, it almost goes back to full circle of what do you need to do? Make sure you have people who are working with, or have people in your organization who understand what they're working with, versus just like straight from, I'm going to ask it the complex question and take the answer and stick it out there and say it's right. I think there's just a natural, I liked Ma's description of it's a super savant 2-year-old, 3-year-old who can read really well and knows a bunch of stuff, but doesn't really yet have all of the kind of like decision-making prefrontal cortex type abilities to know what to use when and how. So I think that analogy is a really good analogy that you can then apply to, like, where do you use your ethics and a higher application of that versus where do you do not.
Good for your time.
Awesome. Of course.
Yeah. Angela, Michelle, Miles, this one was such an amazing conversation. I was like writing notes and notes, but here's how I summarized it. And let's see if I got the gist of it. The thing that I took away was validating where we were investing from a Women in Cloud community to get women ready with AI, which was spot on, right? That is where helping them understand where the use cases are and how you need to skill yourself up. Fabulous. So I took 4 things that every one of us, if you're listening, is make sure you learn how to do strategy work. You need to know how the strategy of AI works, and you learn how to write a strategy on what a use case and how you can implement it. Data cleansing is a critical component. I think that I didn't connect before, but now I think that is part of your strategy plan, is the data cleansing. How do you create the models and how do you keep it cleansed? This one has to be a new discipline going forward. Investment in security, securing your data, securing your people, securing the infrastructure, the APIs. I think it's going to be much more complex than before. So I think learning about cybersecurity is a good skill to have. So skill up on cybersecurity. And the last one is retraining workforce. And I think, Miles, you hit really hard on that, is you really have to put in time to skill up. I think this is the first time in the tech industry in the last 30 years I've seen where you have to really rethink how you get trained, because you have to keep up with it. Did you think I captured all of it?
Bang on. Yeah.
Okay, here's an ask of you.
I think ChatGPT is going to want to hire you.
Yeah. Like, did you run it through a model?
I would love, we'll see about that one.
All right.
But here's the one, the media and entertainment. We were working on a tech bridge between tech and the Hollywood, and we invested in movies, but I didn't realize that there's so many automations can be done. So I would love to spend some time with both of you and
Sure.
if it's possible to really figure out what those models look like, because we will be on many festival tracks this year because of the Icons movie and other feature films that our community was able to produce it. But I think there were 4 use cases. I don't think the Hollywood really understands how they could take advantage of it in behind the scene, not in front. The front, there is IP and other things, but behind the scene, they can really drive a lot of automation and savings, which is pretty cool from a producer standpoint. So that one was great. There were a few questions. Can I ask you that?
Sure.
Okay, so the first question that came in is, as an individual contributor, what skills should I be investing on to able to keep up at par with the AI tools that is getting created? Is there any specific rhythm to it or a way that people should consider?
I think it depends on what kind of individual contributor that you are. We have lots of IC software engineers, and I think they need not only to be learning about AI code generation and unit test generation and data processing and all the rest of that, as well as the kind of chat and information summarization and information lookup kinds of tools that are so critical. If you're an IC that's working in media and entertainment, you have a focus on reviewing potential speakers, right? There's no reason that all of us are participant in the internet someplace. The records are great. You can start digging around and trying to ask questions. Give me the lists that there isn't a top 10 list of yet out on the web. Let's assemble it out of who do you think has the most interesting blog posts about this or that, or what are those kinds of things. The corpus of information that's been passed into most of these systems is just so vast that it can draw interpolative connections that can be difficult to get at, even with quite a lot of research. Like a bicycle, you could spend a long time describing it, or you could just bang on the thing for a little while and then you get to ride around and it's fun. I also encourage a lot of folks to get hands-on now and try, and you'll start to get the kind of topographical map of the things that work really well and the things that are just cross-eyed and not quite it. It is not the kind of place, I think, where for most ICs in any of the different disciplines, especially for consuming kind of product level executions, that a lot of formal onboarding or training is really critical at all. These things are designed to be consumed. It is a class of new human interface in a bunch of ways, built just for our craziness. So jump in.
And I'll layer onto that. I mentioned it. I literally, so working on I focused with Mars on the go-to-market at one point, sort of 3 months in, I was like, wait, we need to do this with our team. And it was simple as click the button at the top of our Google Meet. Hey, tell everyone hands off keyboard. Okay, what do we do with those notes? Oh, wow, this is interesting. So I think there's actually a lot of back to depending on your IC role, anytime you draft an agenda, an email that's not as straightforward, like a more formal communication, you need to document something, those are all, everybody does them in some way, shape or form in their role. Start there even, because I think for me personally, even that massively increased my comprehension as I understood what we were working with customers on, bigger, more complex problems. You also start to see just what is actually possible, and you just get more familiar with the tools.
Yeah, and I think, Michelle, with Gen AI coming in, I think the language skills for everyone is normalized at the same level. Organizing the information in a very comprehensive way has happened. Yeah. So I think everyone can really grow up the chain, and everyone can really show up with the greatest creativity and accomplish stuff, right? Which is where I feel like, personally for me, I'm not a native English speaker. For me, it has a game changer. Yeah. The same thing I wanted to say, but I couldn't say it. And I used to spend hours writing that. And now it takes only seconds. I was like, wow, this is so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And important to catch, right?
Yeah.
I have a brilliant writer friend of mine. She's she's 30 published books, lives on an island. She's doing great. And she loves these tools, right? They are incredible research aids. And what they do a great job is cliche, right? You should recognize that in some ways the text that it produces. So you're exactly right. It will do an incredible job of bringing your text up to the average. And if you would like above average text, it might not be able to do that, because it's really literally designed to produce the average. That's the whole thing, right? What is the most likely next character? So I think the hope is this can handle some of the tedium, some of the stuff that feels rote, so you can spend more of your energy, more of your focus on the part that's the part that's unique and creative and specific to the kind of thing you're working on. That's a great way to refocus your energy.
Absolutely. So there were a few cool things that happened on today's call, and it was such an amazing session. So thank you to all three of you for doing it. But we had the highest amount of memes on people expressing their emotion. That was so cool. So I want all of you to do is select a meme of what you felt today and put it in the chat. I want to see what you felt. Go ahead, take a time. And also let us know what were your takeaways from this conversation and one action you will take. What I want to do is share some opportunities with you for the next couple of weeks, because we are coming into the July, which is one of the most important time of the year, and we do a lot of things. So we would love to share some of the opportunity, and I want you all to be part of. So take a look at it, Miles.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Unbelievable. Unbelievable memes. Look at that.
yeah. No, I'm sorry. Memes are my love language. It's a fault of mine. I understand that.
I
Designed for my strange brain.
This is the first time we had where the community actually did so many memes to express a complex topic of AI, which is amazing. That's what a community does.
A meme is effectively a compression technique, right?
Yes.
You could try to type out, I like Patrick Paris, I think that's his name, probably not. And if he was in a suit and thought that it was like an opportunity to explain to somebody that there was a challenge that you had to rise to, and if I wanted to tell somebody that that's a lot of English, or you can just put the GIF in and then everybody's very happy, right? I support compressed comments.
Yeah, Miles, I think for your personality that you bring, I think today the community definitely shared that feeling, and you really brought the community to really have fun and enjoy. So we're going to take all these memes and put a collage of it and share it with the world, saying this is what, when you partner with Insight, this is what you get. You have fun, it's exciting, and it's empowering and inspiring experience. So
Miles and I never have any fun working together, ever.
We saw on the screen the chemistry. You both have a very... So here are a few opportunities. I do want to thank Insight for really partnering with us on the Empower Her Access Awards. We are at the tail end of the nomination. So I want to have all of you really consider recognizing and celebrating amazing people in the industry. Over the last 4 years, we have recognized 2,400 people in the world, and it's really about you. And if you think it's not me, then you really need to question yourself, because everybody has done some amazing work in the industry. So take a moment either to nominate yourself or others in the ecosystem. The second opportunity that is available is the Top 100 Global Speaker Preparedness Program. It's really allowing you to really become a thought leader in the industry. So most of the people who are in the program, they speak on Bright Talks that reaches 30 million people. And also we develop them to speak about topics on AI and cyber, sustainability, and anything that we related to the workforce development and economic development. People are getting prepared on their thought leadership. So consider being part of it. And as part of the Insider Circle program, next slide, the areas that really focus on is to really cultivate you to be a leader and also celebrate. So we have around 75 people growing at a rate I've never seen. So I know Doreen was here, so she's being part of the community. So we focus on 3 areas: the executive presence and preparedness, very important at this moment in life to really have your gravitas, working on your speaker preparedness. If you saw Michelle and Miles, they are very eloquent speakers and they are the thought leaders, right? And then focusing on a community engagement, which is focused on ESG, which is focusing on people, profit, and the planet, and ensuring that we are becoming the global citizens that we need to be. So I would ask each one of you to look into the program and see if you want to be part of this journey. Now, coming to there are a few opportunities around the cybersecurity scholarship. 5,000 of them has been provided by Microsoft. I ask each one of you, if you're in US, please consider applying for it. It is definitely transformative. It's a certification scholarship valued at $6,500. So you will not get this opportunity. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity that's being created. And the one is upcoming is the B2B Summit. It's really focused on go-to-market. We'll have the insight leaders going to be there. It's going to be a jam-packed content, really focused on how to really build strategic go-to-market, which is AI-powered, AI-fueled, so that as a marketing person, as a partnership person, you know how to really create use cases so you can partner strategically in the current market. And the last one is your skills challenge, which is focused on getting you credentialed. It takes literally weeks for you to earn that credential. And we have gamified the entire experience so you can win prizes, you get spotlights, you can speak at events, and also get you access into the recruiters. Michelle, Miles, are you hiring on your team?
Not this afternoon.
Not this afternoon, but we certainly across wider insight, we have a lot of roles on our website. There's definitely a few openings on the SATA side as well. And the whole ecosystem broadly in this space, I think, is growing as well. So we're happy to try to share some resources and that you can share with the community.
Absolutely. The reason why I asked you that prompted question is because we will create a talent capacity that I would love you to consider. And as the projects are opening up, these are verifiable project-based credentials. It allows you to tap into a very high-skilled network that you can bring into the projects if you're interested. So this ecosystem, we are aimed for getting 1,000 women and allies credentialed on AI over the next 6 months. So we would love each one of you to consider this opportunity. And the last one is we do have another 7 minutes. Anyone interested to go into a networking? Put it in the chat, say yes or no. Otherwise, we'll wrap up today's call and allow everybody to go enjoy the weekend. Do you want to network or you want to say, I am done, let's go? And
I'm happy to talk shop.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah,
so
I'm good for a little bit.
Okay, so what we will do is have Michelle and Miles spend some 10 minutes with you to network. And after that, this is pretty much, we'll close the session. You can spend some time with them and have a great weekend. And with that, can you go back to the last slide? Before we conclude today's presentation session, what is one action you will take to develop your skills with AI? Take a prompt engineering course. Beautiful. What is one action? Because you are in a community that takes action. So what is one action? Publish. Fantastic. What are you publishing, ICE? Join the Vic AI program. Take some courses from Microsoft Copilot. Build an MVP with AI. Crystal Clear Financials she's publishing. Beautiful. So I love that our community is taking action. With that, we want to thank Lena, Andrea, Marissa, Betsy, and the entire Insight team for making such a great content for all of us to learn today. And Miles, Michelle, thank you so much for being here.
Of course.
And we'll get into the lounge and people will come and meet with you. Is that okay?
Great.
Perfect. Thank
Cool.
you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.